Why so many seniors were shocked by their January check for millions of Social Security beneficiaries. January was supposed to bring relief. After months of hearing about a cost of living adjustment, a COLA meant to help offset rising prices, many seniors expected their January check to finally feel a little bigger, a little easier, a little more breathing room. But when the deposit arrived, the reaction was not relief. It was shock. Across the country, seniors opened their bank accounts and asked the same question. Why doesn't this look any different? For some, the amount barely changed. For others, it increased by only a few dollars. And for many, it felt like nothing happened at all. That confusion quickly turned into worry. Did something go wrong? Was there a mistake? Did I miss something important? Here is the most important thing to understand right away. You did not do anything wrong. This is not a personal error. It is not a missed form. It is not because you misunderstood the rules. What happened is the result of how the system works, a system that is far more complicated than most people are ever told. Social Security did increase benefits, but another part of the system quietly took a bigger share at the same time. And that interaction is what left so many January checks feeling disappointing, confusing, and even discouraging. This is not about being careless or uninformed. It's about navigating a system that rarely explains itself clearly. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened, calmly, step by step, so you can understand your January check without fear or self-blame. The expectation gap that caught so many seniors off guard. To understand why the January check felt so disappointing for so many people, we have to talk about expectations and how those expectations were built. For months leading up to January, the message most seniors heard was simple. There is a COLA increase, a cost of living adjustment meant to help Social Security benefits keep up with inflation. With prices for groceries, utilities, and medications still high, many people naturally assumed this increase would be noticeable. In everyday language, COLA sounds like a raise, so seniors did what anyone would do. They mentally prepared. They hoped January would feel a little lighter. Maybe not life-changing, but at least meaningful. That's why the reaction was so strong when reality didn't match the expectation. The problem is not that COLA didn't happen, it did. The problem is that COLA was never designed to make life easier, only to make it less worse. And that distinction is rarely explained clearly. COLA is calculated using a formula based on broad inflation data. It does not focus specifically on what seniors spend the most on, like healthcare, prescriptions, property taxes, or utilities. It looks at the economy as a whole, not at retirement life in particular. On top of that, COLA is announced as a percentage, not as a real-world dollar outcome. A few percent increase sounds encouraging, but when applied to modest monthly benefits, the actual dollar amount can be surprisingly small. So by the time January arrived, many seniors were emotionally prepared for relief, but financially met with reality. This gap between expectation and outcome is what created the shock, not because seniors misunderstood, but because the system rarely explains the full picture up front, and that missing context is what we need to talk about next. Why COLA never feels as helpful as it sounds. Once expectations collide with reality, the next question seniors naturally ask is, why does COLA never seem to help the way it's supposed to? The answer lies in how COLA is calculated, and more importantly, what it does not measure. Cost of living adjustments are based on a broad inflation index that reflects spending patterns of the general working population. That includes transportation costs, entertainment, apparel, and expenses that change very differently than the costs seniors face every month. But retirees don't spend like working adults. Seniors spend disproportionately on healthcare, prescriptions, insurance premiums, utilities, and housing-related expenses. These categories often rise faster and more consistently than the general inflation numbers used in the COLA formula. So even when COLA is applied correctly, it can feel disconnected from real life. A small percentage increase might look reasonable on paper, but when applied to a modest monthly benefit, the actual dollar increase can be surprisingly limited. $20 here, $30 there, and that's before any deductions are taken out. This is why so many seniors feel like they are running in place. Prices keep moving forward. Income technically increases, but buying power barely changes. And because COLA is discussed in percentages instead of real-world impact, many people don't realize this until the check actually arrives. The disappointment doesn't come from entitlement. It comes from math that doesn't match lived experience. COLA was never designed to make retirement comfortable. It was designed to slow down erosion, and slowing erosion feels very different than relief. Understanding this helps explain why January's check felt underwhelming, and why the real surprise wasn't just COLA itself, but what happened after COLA was applied. That's where the next piece of the puzzle comes in. How Medicare quietly offset the COLA increase. For many seniors, the real surprise in January didn't come from Social Security itself. It came from something that happened before the money ever reached their bank account. That something was Medicare. Most Social Security beneficiaries are enrolled in Medicare Part B, which covers doctor visits, outpatient care, and many essential medical services. The monthly premium for Part B is automatically deducted from your Social Security benefit before you receive your payment. Here's where the confusion begins. Social Security applies the COLA increase to your gross benefit first. On paper, that increase is real. The problem is that Medicare Part B premiums can rise at the same time, and when they do, the higher premium is taken out immediately. So what many seniors experienced in January was this. Social Security went up with one hand. Medicare took more with the other. The result is a net payment that looks unchanged, or barely changed at all. Because Medicare deductions happen quietly and automatically, many people never see the full COLA increase in their bank account. They only see the final number. And without a clear explanation, it feels like the increase simply vanished. This is not a mistake. It's not a missed adjustment. And it's not something you caused. It's the interaction between two large systems that don't always explain themselves clearly. For seniors on modest benefits, even a small Medicare premium increase can absorb most, or all, of a COLA adjustment. That's why so many January checks felt disappointing, even though the increase technically happened. Understanding this interaction is crucial. It shifts the question from what went wrong to how does this system really work? And once you see that clearly, the shock begins to make sense, even if the outcome is still frustrating. Why some seniors felt the impact more than others. After understanding how Medicare Part B can offset a COLA increase, another question naturally comes up. Why did this hit some people harder than others? The answer lies in starting benefit levels and individual circumstances. Seniors who receive lower monthly Social Security benefits tend to feel the impact much more sharply. When your benefit is modest to begin with, even a small Medicare premium increase can absorb most or all of your COLA. A $25 increase doesn't go very far if your healthcare deduction rises by a similar amount. On the other hand, beneficiaries with higher monthly benefits may still see a noticeable net increase. The same percentage COLA applied to a larger base simply produces more dollars, making it easier to outrun rising Medicare costs. There's also something known as the hold harmless rule, which protects many beneficiaries from seeing their net Social Security payment go down because of Medicare Part B premium increases. But here's the key detail. Hold harmless prevents a decrease. It does not guarantee a meaningful increase. In practice, that means your payment may stay roughly the same even after COLA rather than dropping. For many seniors, that technical protection still feels like disappointment when expectations were higher. Additionally, not everyone is covered by hold harmless. New Medicare enrollees, higher income beneficiaries who pay income-related premiums, and certain others may see larger deductions. None of this reflects a mistake or unfair targeting. It reflects how layered the system has become. Two seniors can receive the same COLA percentage. Two seniors can both be protected and still walk away with very different January checks. That complexity is what makes this situation feel personal, even though it's systemic. Understanding why the impact varies helps replace confusion with context. And context, even when the outcome is frustrating, brings a why the increase felt invisible for so many people. By the time January checks arrived, many seniors weren't just confused, and they were discouraged. On paper, benefits increased, but in real life, that increase felt almost invisible. This disconnect comes down to net versus gross income. Social Security statements often highlight the gross benefit, the amount before deductions. COLA is applied to that number. But what actually matters to seniors is the net payment, the amount that lands in the bank after Medicare and other deductions are taken out. When Medicare Part B premiums rise alongside COLA, the increase is effectively canceled out. The math works, but the experience feels wrong. You're told there's an increase, yet your day-to-day reality doesn't change. For many seniors, this creates a feeling of being misled, even though no one intentionally misrepresented the facts. The system speaks in technical terms, while seniors live in practical ones. Another factor is timing. COLA announcements often come months before January. Expectations build slowly. People plan mentally. Then, when the deposit finally arrives and the net amount barely changes, the emotional letdown is sharp. This isn't because seniors misunderstood, it's because the explanation was incomplete. COLA is a gross adjustment, Medicare is a net deduction, and the interaction between the two is rarely explained clearly. Understanding this doesn't make the outcome easier, but it does remove self-blame. You weren't careless. You weren't unrealistic. You were responding to information that didn't show the full picture. When you understand that January's check reflects multiple moving parts, not a single broken promise, the frustration becomes easier to process. The system didn't fail overnight. It revealed how complex it has become, and that realization sets the stage for understanding what, if anything, seniors can realistically do next. Why this wasn't a mistake, even if it felt like one. After seeing their January check, many seniors reached the same conclusion almost immediately. Something must be wrong. The amount didn't match expectations. The increase didn't feel real, and the silence around the explanation made it worse. But here is the most important reassurance at this stage. For the vast majority of beneficiaries, nothing was miscalculated. This was not a system error, it was not a missing form, and it was not a failure to apply COLA. What made this moment so unsettling is that the system rarely explains outcomes in plain language. It shows results, not reasoning. Seniors are left to interpret complex interactions between Social Security, Medicare, and federal formulas without clear guidance. When people don't understand why something happened, they naturally assume a mistake. In reality, what occurred was an interaction. COLA increased the gross benefit while Medicare Part B adjusted premiums at the same time. The system did exactly what it was programmed to do, even if the outcome felt unfair or confusing. This distinction matters emotionally. Believing something went wrong creates anxiety. Understanding that the system worked, even imperfectly, restores a sense of control. It also explains why calling Social Security often leads to the same answer: your benefit is correct. That response can feel dismissive, but it's usually accurate. The issue isn't calculation, it's communication. For seniors, recognizing this can prevent a spiral of self-doubt. You didn't misunderstand. You weren't careless. You weren't naive to expect more. You were responding to incomplete explanations. January didn't reveal a mistake in your record. It revealed a gap between how the system speaks and how real life feels. And once that gap is understood, it becomes easier to focus not on blame, but on what practical steps, if any, actually make sense going forward. What seniors should check before assuming anything is wrong. After the initial shock wears off, many seniors feel an urge to do something, call Social Security, assume an error, or worry that they missed an important notice. Before jumping to conclusions, there are a few calm, practical steps that can bring clarity. The first thing to review is your Social Security statement, either online or by mail. Look closely at 3 specific lines: your gross benefit amount, your Medicare Part B deduction, your net payment. Often, the explanation is right there. The gross amount did increase, but the Medicare deduction rose at the same time. Seeing those numbers side by side helps turn confusion into understanding. Next, check whether you are enrolled in Medicare Part B and whether your premium changed this year. Many seniors don't actively choose their Part B premium. It adjusts automatically. When that adjustment happens alongside COLA, it can erase much of the increase without warning. It's also worth confirming whether you fall under the hold harmless provision. If your net check did not go down, that rule likely protected you. Even if it didn't create the increase you expected, if something still doesn't make sense, then, and only then, it may be worth contacting Social Security. But go in calmly, with your statement in hand and specific questions ready. Asking why the net amount changed is often more productive than assuming a mistake. Most importantly, avoid panic. January checks felt confusing because explanations were thin, not because something broke. Taking a few quiet minutes to review the facts often answers more questions than hours of worry. Understanding replaces anxiety, and understanding is always the first step toward peace of mind. Why this feels personal. Even though it isn't one of the hardest parts of this January experience for many seniors is not the dollar amount itself, it's how personal the disappointment feels. When your check doesn't change the way you expected, it's easy to internalize that outcome. People start asking themselves quiet, painful questions. Did I misunderstand something? Did I miss a step? Did I do something wrong years ago that's affecting me now? That emotional reaction is completely human, but it's important to say this clearly and calmly. What happened is systemic, not personal. Social Security and Medicare operate using fixed formulas and automatic deductions. They do not evaluate effort, need, or fairness on an individual emotional level. They apply rules uniformly, even when the results feel unequal. The reason this moment feels so personal is because money in retirement is deeply tied to identity. Your check represents independence, security, the ability to manage without asking for help. When that check disappoints, it can feel like a judgment, even though it isn't one. Comparisons make this worse. Hearing that someone else received a larger increase or saw a noticeable change can trigger feelings of unfairness or failure. But those differences usually come down to benefit size, Medicare status, income-related premiums, or timing, not worth or deservingness. The system doesn't know your story. It doesn't see your sacrifices. It doesn't measure effort. It only processes numbers. Understanding that doesn't make the outcome easier, but it does remove misplaced self-blame. You didn't fall short. You weren't careless. You weren't unrealistic. You encountered a system that speaks in formulas while you live in real life. Recognizing that separation is powerful. It allows you to step back emotionally, stop turning frustration inward, and focus instead on what actually helps: clarity, steadiness, and informed choices going forward. This moment doesn't define you. It simply reveals how complex the system has become. The quiet financial decisions seniors should avoid right now. After the shock of the January check settles in, many seniors feel an urge to react, not emotionally, but financially. And this is the moment when small decisions can quietly create bigger problems later. The most important guidance right now is simple. Don't make sudden financial changes based on frustration or disappointment. When income feels tighter than expected, it's tempting to reach for quick fixes, using credit cards more often, delaying bills with the hope that things will even out later, making impulsive changes to investments or savings because the system feels unfair. But these reactions usually create more stress, not less. January's outcome did not signal a sudden drop in your benefits. It revealed a structural squeeze, rising costs, meeting fixed income. That kind of pressure requires calm adjustments, not urgent moves. Another common mistake is assuming something must be corrected retroactively. Some seniors spend hours on the phone or file appeals believing a larger increase is owed. In most cases, this leads only to exhaustion. If your statement shows the COLA was applied and Medicare deductions explain the net amount, there is usually nothing to reverse. It's also important to avoid drastic budget cuts that affect health or safety, skipping medications, avoiding doctor visits, delaying critical home repairs. These choices often cost more later, financially and physically. Right now, the healthiest approach is steadiness. Review expenses calmly, prioritize essentials, avoid new debt when possible, and most importantly, don't let disappointment push you into decisions that don't align with your long-term stability. The system may be complex, but your response doesn't have to be. Thoughtful, measured choices protect you far more than reacting to a single month's frustration. This isn't about giving up control. It's about using it wisely, even when the outcome wasn't what you hoped for. What seniors can realistically do moving forward. After understanding why January's check looked the way it did and what not to do, the next question becomes practical. What can seniors realistically do now? The first step is accepting clarity over control. You cannot change how COLA is calculated. You cannot stop Medicare premiums from adjusting. And you cannot force the system to align perfectly with your real-life expenses. But you can control how you respond. One of the most helpful actions is to re-anchor your budget to net income, not gross promises. That means planning based on what actually arrives in your account each month. even if that number feels disappointing. Grounding decisions in reality reduces anxiety and prevents constant recalculations. Next, look for pressure points, not perfection. Instead of trying to fix everything, identify one or two areas that create the most stress: utilities, prescriptions, insurance, food. Small adjustments in high-pressure areas often matter more than cutting everywhere. This is also a good time to review available assistance programs calmly, not because something is wrong, but because systems change. Utility assistance, prescription discount programs, local senior benefits, or Medicare plan reviews can sometimes reduce costs without drastic sacrifice. These reviews should be done carefully, not urgently. Another important step is emotional. Stop blaming yourself. January's outcome was not a reflection of poor planning or misunderstanding. It was the result of overlapping systems that rarely communicate clearly. Staying informed without obsessing is also key. Check statements, read official notices, but don't let every headline dictate your mood. The goal now is not to chase what didn't happen, it's to stabilize what is happening. Calm, informed adjustments protect your independence far better than frustration ever could. And that steadiness, especially in a complex system, is a form of strength many people underestimate. The emotional weight behind a smaller than expected check. By the time seniors reach this point in the conversation, many realize that January's Social Security check wasn't wrong, but that realization doesn't erase how it felt. For a lot of people, the disappointment went deeper than numbers. Money in retirement isn't abstract. It's tied to safety, independence, and the quiet pride of not needing to ask for help. So when the January check failed to deliver the relief many hoped for, it didn't just affect budgets, and that it affected emotions. Some seniors felt embarrassed for expecting more. Others felt foolish for believing the headlines. Many simply felt tired of systems that feel complicated and impersonal. That emotional response matters. When stress builds quietly over time, even a small letdown can feel heavy. And when people don't understand why something happened, they often turn that frustration inward. They question their judgment, their planning, their worth. But here's the truth that deserves to be said clearly. This outcome says nothing about you. You did not mismanage your retirement. You did not misunderstand on your own. You were responding to incomplete explanations in a complex system. The system measures inflation broadly. It deducts healthcare costs automatically. It explains changes technically, not humanly. Feeling disappointed does not mean you failed. It means you were hoping for stability in a time when everything feels more expensive. Acknowledging that emotional weight is not weakness, it's honesty, and once that weight is named, it becomes easier to release it, to stop replaying January in your mind, stop questioning yourself, and start focusing forward. Because peace of mind in retirement doesn't come from perfect numbers. It comes from understanding, self-compassion, and the confidence to move on without carrying unnecessary blame. And that emotional clarity is just as important as any financial explanation. Why understanding matters more than the dollar amount. As seniors reflect on their January Social Security check, one important realization begins to settle in. The most valuable thing gained here is understanding, not money. When the system feels confusing, silence fills the gaps. Rumors grow. Self-doubt creeps in. People begin questioning their own judgment instead of questioning the structure itself. That's what makes moments like this so emotionally draining. Understanding changes that. Once you see how COLA works, how Medicare premiums are deducted, and why net payments don't always reflect announced increases, something important happens. The fear softens, the confusion lifts, and the experience stops feeling personal. This doesn't magically fix tight budgets, it doesn't lower grocery prices, and it doesn't make healthcare cheaper overnight, but it restores orientation. When you understand what happened, you stop waiting for something that isn't coming. You stop replaying January in your head. You stop wondering if you missed a step or made a mistake years ago. That mental clarity matters deeply in retirement. Uncertainty drains energy. Clarity returns it. This is why calm, factual explanations are so important, especially for seniors. Not to justify outcomes, but to replace fear with context. When you understand the system's limits, you can plan within them instead of fighting shadows. Understanding also protects you from misinformation going forward. Once you've seen how easily expectations can be inflated, You become more cautious with headlines and claims that promise relief without details. Knowledge doesn't change the system, but it changes how the system affects you. And in a world where many things feel out of control, that shift alone is powerful. As we move toward the final part, the focus turns to what truly matters most in moments like this: staying grounded, steady, and confident despite disappointment. Moving forward with calm, confidence, and perspective. As we reach the end of this discussion, it's important to step back and look at what January truly revealed, not just about Social Security, but about how seniors navigate uncertainty. January did not expose a personal failure. It did not reveal a missed opportunity, and it did not mean you misunderstood something that everyone else grasped. What it exposed was a system that speaks in percentages and formulas while seniors live in real dollars and daily decisions. Your January check wasn't smaller because you planned poorly. It wasn't disappointing because you expected too much. It felt underwhelming because rising healthcare costs and automatic deductions quietly reshaped the outcome, without explanation that matched real life. And that disconnect matters. But here is the grounding truth to hold on to going forward. You now understand what happened. Understanding replaces fear with context. Context replaces self-blame with clarity, and clarity restores confidence. Retirement is not about winning against the system. It's about learning how to live steadily within it, protecting your peace of mind even when outcomes feel unfair or disappointing. The most important thing you can do now is stop replaying January in your head. The check has arrived. The numbers are what they are. There is no hidden correction coming, and there is no mistake silently waiting to be fixed. What is available to you is steadiness. Steadiness in how you budget, steadiness in how you consume information, steadiness in how you treat yourself when expectations don't match reality. You have navigated far more complex chapters in life than this. You've adapted before, you've adjusted before, and you've done it without losing your dignity. This moment doesn't define your retirement. It doesn't define your worth. It simply reminds us all of one essential truth. Clarity brings calm, and calm allows you to move forward with confidence, even when the system doesn't make it easy. And that calm, more than any adjustment or increase, is something worth protecting.